Hi, and welcome to episode 61 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson, a PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada.
And I'm Heidi Smith-Parker. I'm a postdoc at the University of Texas at Austin.
And today we're joined by Dr. Alex Bond, who's an adjunct at the University of Saskatchewan, as well as the new senior conservation scientist at the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. Hi, Alex. Welcome to the program, and why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Cool. Thanks, Morgan. So most of the work that I do revolves around seabirds. So most people in North America at least have heard of puffins. So puffins and gulls and their ilk. And I sort of take two different approaches. One is on-the-ground field work. So I go out to these remote seabird islands in Alaska or Newfoundland and work with the populations there, sort of more population ecology. And then in the winter, the sort of penalty for spending all that much fun time in wonderful places is I get to sit in a lab and do very tedious lab work. We do a lot of stable isotope work and a lot of contaminants work. And most of the stuff that I do is sort of applied conservation bent to it. So that's that in a nutshell.
That's awesome. So, like every human, I love puffins. Even when you said puffin, inside I went, "Aw," because I would watch the puffin cam. I do remember days of like leaving the puffin cam open on my computer. Do they lose their cuteness once you've worked around them for a long time?
We call them 1-pound balls of hate. They're the thing. So puffins burrow. So their nests are in the ground. So they dig these holes into the soil, and to do that, they have incredibly sharp claws. And so, literally, and they weigh roughly a pound. They're about 450 grams. And
wow.
when you're holding them in your hand, the claws have a wonderful habit of hooking underneath your fingernails, which is all kinds of fun.
Wow. So those are not your favorite birds then?
They're lovely. Every bird that I've worked with has drawn blood from me in some capacity.
Do you, as far as like pollutants and environmental concerns, do you feel like people, because puffins are very charismatic, balls of hatred, do you feel that people are more likely to pay attention to sort of those results, or maybe they'll get more popular press?
I mean, puffins certainly are what you could call the charismatic megafauna. They're cute, they're adorable, everyone loves them. You can buy, plush puffins anywhere from, Cape Cod to Newfoundland, practically. So they've got a neat draw in that way. But a lot of the species that we work with are just as wonderfully charismatic. Just not in Eastern North America.
What species do you feel like that could be the next big, could be the next puffin?
Now that we've broken it down and shown everybody that they're just big balls of hate, apparently.
Yeah, well, this would be like America's Next Top Puffin or something.
Yeah. That would be amazing. If Animal Planet ever wants to do science or animal stuff again, if they ever want to show something real on TV, I would watch America's Next Top Puffin. I would.
A lot of the albatross, of course, are incredibly charismatic. These birds that have 9-foot wingspans and spend their first 10 years just flying around the world at sea. Coming to land to breed every 2 years. So in some parts of the world, like the Southern Oceans, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, these are the birds that are sort of the charismatic icon pictures of seabird conservation.
Yeah. That's like America's Next Top Badass Bird, I think. The huge wingspan, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the largest wingspan of any bird is a wandering albatross, and it's 9 feet or 3 meters.
Wow. That's incredible.
Since we're kind of on the topic of albatrosses, or albatross, I don't know what the plural is.
It is not albitri or albatross. It is properly albatrosses.
It is albatrosses. See?
Yes.
Right. So, the thing is, they spend so much time flying. Do they eat? And if they eat, what do they eat? And if they do eat, how the hell do they get back up in the air after they're finished eating?
Do they eat? Of course they eat. They're the only... the best-known case of birds that don't eat, of course, are penguins in Antarctica that fast for months at a time, particularly the males while they incubate the egg. March the Penguins, Morgan Freeman, narrated documentary. But albatross eat a lot of things like flying squid and flying fish, and what they do is or fish eggs, and they basically just land on the surface of the water, and they catch their prey, and then they basically paddle run across the water, flapping their giant wings to take off again.
That's
Wow.
going to be something crazy to see.
It's pretty amazing.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. So what made you start a blog?
Oh, what made me start a blog? So for those of you who don't know, I blog at The Lab and Field, which is coincidentally also my Twitter handle. And I've usually been in a pretty small lab or pretty small research group. And so when I came to Saskatchewan 3 years ago as a postdoc, our lab group was really small. It was me and my PI. We didn't have any other students, or the students were often away in the field. So we have a student right now who's in the sort of northwestern Colombia trying to catch Swainson's thrushes and doing a pretty good job of it. But she's away for 6 months of the year. So when I did my PhD, we had a pretty good lab, and we would have these sort of water cooler discussions about science and the culture of science and the culture of academia, and how to properly find a job, and our gripes with reference letters and that sort of thing. And when I came here, I didn't necessarily have that same outlet, so I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll start a blog, and that's pretty much how it happened.
Yeah, I think you have, it's my favorite sort of type of blog. Someone who's doing cool science and in academia and like sharing sort of the trials and tribulations of that. It's very entertaining as well.
Oh, thank you.
And not too long. I'm never a fan of really long posts. When I start reading it, I was like, damn it, I have actual work to do today. But it's really nice. Do you feel that is your audience mainly other academics or other people doing, that type of field work?
I don't really know who my audience is. I don't pay for that sort of insider knowledge from the fine folks at Google. Most of the feedback that I get are mostly from other folks in science and research. So, if that's any indication.
Yeah, sometimes when you can look at the sort of feedback that you do get, and you're like, wow, 8 people from Finland today. Interesting. Maybe I've got some fans there. Who knows?
Yeah, I've definitely have a dedicated following in Portugal for some reason, and where is the other one that keeps popping up? Oh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there are definitely those that you just sort of. East Timor. I've had people visit the blog from East Timor.
That's amazing.
It's incredible. And so for me, the world is now my lab group that I can discuss the things that I would normally just discuss with 1 or 2 other people.
That's awesome.
That is the beauty of social media. So it brings up a good question, though, because you do write a blog, and you write a very good blog. You're also active on social media like Twitter and such. You also are one of the most prolific authors I think I've seen at the postdoc stage.
Right?
Like you've got... I checked out your CV before we came on.
Oh, this is going to be embarrassing.
So I didn't count the entire list because it's massive, and I had to actually come and do the podcast. But you've already had 3 papers published in 2014, and you have another 3 more in press?
Yeah, so some of these are, so for me, so I'm 3 years into a postdoc, so a lot of the work that I do now is collaborative. So I contribute a big chunk of something or an analysis or some field data and interpretation, and someone else sort of takes the lead on the paper. So and a lot of these things have been sitting around for a long time. So the 3 papers that are sort of in press, one of them is a master's student in the lab where I did my PhD. It's a chapter of hers that's been kicking around for several years. It's finally going to come out. One was, and maybe we'll talk about it, I'm a big fan of natural history and its place in modern science, and so I started doing what I called Natural History Fridays, where I would just basically work on a natural history project for a couple of hours a week, and one of these papers came out of that. And then the third one was, again, just a collaborative thing that I worked on with some folks in Alaska, and I just provided some samples and some interpretations. So if I look at my sort of research career, I mean, most of my early papers were like with just me and my supervisor, or a close set of collaborators. And then as I transitioned into the postdoc phase, a lot of them started becoming more collaborative and more sort of working group papers. And so that I think is, I mean, it's wonderful because I get to interact with all these wonderful people, and it's great for the CV as I, looking for jobs and grants and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, because when they look at all your publications and they're like, this guy must be 70. Then you're not. It must be pretty impressive. Often, like, collaborations take you to projects that are really tangential to your interests. Is there one paper that was really sort of something cool that you got to learn and knew nothing about before?
Yeah. So I met someone at a conference. I was at a conference in France 2 years ago. So I use a lot of stable isotopes, which we can use to look at diet and foraging of animals. And this was the big international isotope ecology meeting in France. And I met a guy there who had come to the lab that I'm working in now before I was here, just to visit for a few months. And we started talking, and he had a data set but didn't have the time to, or the skill to do a certain kind of analysis on it. And I did. And so we got together, and I ended up writing a paper about cattle in Namibia.
That's awesome.
Which is most decidedly not a seabird.
Yeah, totally not a seabird. That's amazing.
And so this was so successful that we're working on one now on Nile crocodiles.
Wow.
So it's just data that he had collected and needed help analyzing and writing up. So.
Yeah. I want to hear more about this Natural History Friday.
So this is a while ago. So there's if anyone's interested, there's a blog post about it on Lab and Field. I think natural history, which is essentially the foundation of ecology, still has a really strong role to play in science. I mean, ecology is all about observation and trying to detect pattern. And that's essentially what natural history is. Not only that, but it also gives you these incredible skills of observation, of patience, of connecting with your study site. And so a while ago, I realized that I had sort of accumulated or I really wanted to accumulate a bunch of these natural history data. Things like, vagrant records. So, a bird from the Pacific shows up in Iceland or something like that. Or a certain bird that has a particular plumage abnormality, say it's an albino or something like that. And so these were, to me, incredibly valuable contributions and connected me more with the species and with the site and with observation. And so I said, I'm just going to dedicate one afternoon a week, and at that time it was Fridays. It sort of shifts around a bit more now, but where I would just do work on these natural history projects.
That's
That's
awesome.
Natural History Fridays.
So what paper specifically came out from this?
So when I was in the field in 2012, I had a student intern with me who was my field tech, and we were just sitting around the cabin one day. And for birds, there's a series called The Birds of North America, and this is sort of like the be-all and end-all of every breeding species in North America. So there's 718 of these, 12 to 15-page species accounts. And we had the one for a bird called the common murre, which is a large seabird, weighs about 2 pounds, sort of the northern hemisphere equivalent of penguins. And they have ridiculously thick eggs. Like, their eggshells are really thick. So they nest on cliffs, and they're super dense. Like, here's one murre. There's the murre that's nesting right next to it. So they're dense, and the eggs get kicked around. And we thought, oh, gee, I wonder how thick are the eggshells? And so we went to the Birds of North America account, and we flipped through, and of course, there was no data from Newfoundland, which is arguably the species center in Canada. That's where the most of these guys are found. So we picked up some eggs that gulls had eaten, but we could still measure. And Donald measured them back in the lab, and lo and behold, we've got a paper that's going to come out in the next issue of Canadian Field Naturalist on thickness of mer eggshells.
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
I mean, that makes the great point for why natural history is still so important to science. I mean, there's all of this, some people call it basic with absolutely no connotation for that word. This basic science that, as you said earlier, is the basis for most of modern ecology. So you mentioned natural history as a role in science. Where do you see natural history fitting into science, and do you see it's coming back? Because it's kind of had a bit of a downturn lately.
Well, science, of course, before it was called science, it was called natural philosophy. And so we would all be natural philosophers sitting here having a natural philosophical discussion about
That's the only time anybody's ever going to call this a philosophical conversation. I'm not going to lie.
That's quite true.
No, about the state of nature, about how we think and interact with nature, and the physical and biological world. And I think, there's maybe it's just the people that I hang around with, but I think there's an increasing realization that this natural history and observation do play a really important role. And in my mind, grad school is the perfect time to do this, especially if you're an ecologist, because you're often in the field for long periods of time. And what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and you're going to watch stuff around. It might be coming up with the list of compiling a list of bird species for an island, or noticing a particular behavior that you think is, oh, that's kind of cool, and then when you actually look at it, no one's described it before. This happens all the time, and it's those little tidbits. Those are the building blocks, so we can do, we can answer, I guess, further questions. I was going to say higher order, but that's not necessarily what it is. But so we can answer different questions that require us to integrate all of that sort of foundational knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's really good. Like you said, does it field assistant or your undergrad?
Yeah, he was a field tech for the summer.
Because I work on a group of salamanders. I'm just starting out some basic projects with them that almost nothing is known. And they're quite abundant in the United States. And I have an undergrad. And it's so exciting for her because she can literally think up a project and see it through to the end. And it's like a major contribution to what we know about these guys.
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible. I worked in Alaska for my PhD on this group of birds called auklets, which are in the same family as puffins. And apart from our lab group and maybe one other, I mean, there's very little known about these guys. So just some casual observations, led to some really interesting science. So just noticing, for example, birds try to not overlap the major energetic costs of the annual cycle, so they tend not to replace their feathers or molt their feathers at the same time that they breed, because they're both energetically quite expensive. But these guys did, and they started replacing these feathers, their wing feathers, at the same time that the egg was hatching. So they lay one egg a year, and it takes about 30 days for that chick to develop and fledge. And during this time, the parents were molting the first 4 of their flight feathers. And we thought, oh, that's kind of weird and kind of odd. And so with just some basic data collection in the field, and mentioning this to a colleague of mine who worked in Russia, he said, oh yeah, I've got a data set of about 1,800 birds that I've looked at this in. Do you want it? and lo and behold, with some modern statistical analysis, we had a really cool paper and found out that birds that nest further north, where the breeding season or the summer season is compressed, the breeding season isn't, they still molted generally faster than birds in the south, where the sort of suitable period of things like no sea ice and suitable temperatures was longer. And this just all started from sitting in a blind going, gee, that bird's missing a feather.
That's incredible. That's really incredible. Do you have any pet birds?
Do I have any pet birds?
Yeah. No. Would you ever
No.
keep a puffin as a pet? Is that legal?
Is it legal? No. That would contravene the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1917.
Is that true?
Yep.
That's an amazing answer. Okay.
Yep. So in the early 1900s, bird populations around the world or North America rather, were really declining. So that's when the last passenger pigeon died, was 100 years ago this year, for example. And the reason was because we like to shoot them and put them in women's hats. So it was called millinery, and so women would go around with these elaborate plumed hats on their heads, and that basically the hat and feather trade for fashion was what drove down a lot of populations. And so they brought in the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, or Migratory Bird Convention Act in the U.S., and it was signed and went into effect almost 100 years ago. So it's one of the oldest pieces of environmental legislation that we have.
Wow. It's very interesting.
So no, you can't keep a puffin.
Okay.
No little balls of hate in your backyard, apparently, so that's too bad.
No. I'm okay with that, though.
It sounds like it. I don't think that would make a very good pet for Christmas.
Hey kids, want some needles under your fingernails? You heard about a puffin.
Well, it's funny because it's the first species that I ever banded. And when I tell this to other ornithologists, their jaw just drops because they usually work with something like a sparrow or a warbler or a thrush or a robin or something like this, and they say, "Oh yeah, no, it was a puffin."
That's incredible.
So I think there's a pretty good evidence that you spend a hell of a lot of time in the field. I mean, your blog is considered the lab in the field. So obviously fieldwork is really important to you, and I just want to jump to your new job and what you're going to be doing, because I hear that you've got some ridiculous fieldwork that you're going to be doing for this new position you've got.
Yeah. So in June, I'm starting a job with the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, which is Europe's largest environmental NGO. And there's a global partnership of bird conservation organizations called BirdLife International. In Canada, the representatives of that are Bird Studies Canada and Nature Canada. In the US, it's Audubon. And in the UK, it's the Royal Society for Protection of Birds. And my beat will be the what are called the UK Overseas Territories. So these are the little bits of empire that are still scattered around the world. So things that are still part of Britain. So things like Bermuda. But more interestingly, in September, I'll be going to a place called Tristan da Cunha, which is an island in the South Atlantic Ocean about 2,800 kilometers west of Cape Town, South Africa.
Wow.
And it's the most remote inhabited island in the world.
Wow. How long will you be there?
I'll be there for about 2 or 3 months.
Wow. Like how many species? I mean, how many species are known to be there?
Of bird?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, probably 20 to 30 seabirds breed in the island group.
Wow.
And there's 245 people on the main island.
Only 245 people. Wow.
Yeah.
So what are you going to be doing out in the literal middle of nowhere?
It's not nowhere. It's the Atlantic Ocean.
Wow.
So the work that we're doing this year is a couple of things. First, there's a species of albatross called an Atlantic yellow-nosed albatross, and this breeds only in this little group of islands. And these are birds that are ridiculously affected by bycatch in longline fisheries, and so but we honestly have no idea how many there are. The last survey on Tristan was in 1974, so we're going to go there and do a population count, and we'll do a little bit of work with some other species that are down there. Rockhopper penguins. There's a Malaysian tanker carrying soy product that ran aground in 2011, and there was oil spilled, and the penguins got oiled, so their population isn't doing so well. So we're going to go down and do some work there, and some sort of regular monitoring of ongoing studies that have been going on there since the early 1980s.
Wow. So are the other people that live there, all 245 of them, are they also doing, is there like a scientific field station there, or do people actually live there?
No. So there's one scientific staff person that works for Tristan Conservation, and the rest are just regular residents. Most of them are fishermen.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I hope you tweet lots of pictures there.
I'll have to see what sort of state the internet is in when I get there. But
can you imagine if it's like straight dial-up?
Well, usually when I go into the field in Alaska, we don't have internet, we don't have phone. We use a satellite phone and an HF radio to communicate with the outside world. So if there's even dial-up, that will be a vast improvement from my usual situation.
I mean, it's birds, so you can always use like carrier pigeon stuff. Like you should be good at that, right?
Yeah, they gotta know where to go, and they're not very good at taking directions.
Just strap a note onto the back of an albatross and set it loose.
So one of my favorite things on your website is the muskrat mail. That's my favorite.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. People did do that. So in the 1800s, there was a whaling ship that shipwrecked in the South Indian Ocean. I think it was on the Crozet Islands, and they caught an albatross and attached a note, and the bird washed up in Australia with the note attached, and they sent a rescue party and got them off the island.
Wow.
So we're pretty much out of time here, Alex. So that little albatross story is a perfect spot to end off, because that's an amazing story, and I'm going to have to look up that some more. So where can people follow along with all of your adventures, assuming you have internet during those adventures, and your research?
So you can find my blog at labandfield.wordpress.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at @thelabandfield.
Awesome. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be keeping track of you and all your goings on, and making sure they know where the next ball of hate is going to show up.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, that was really great. And for everybody that's at home, we'll have the links to Alex's websites and Twitters up on our website, which can be found at breakingbio.com. You can also send us a message on Twitter by looking for @BreakingBio. You can find us on Facebook by searching for the Breaking Bio podcast. As always, we'd like to thank Alex for joining us this week, and I hope everybody at home will be listening for next week's audience.
Bye. Wow.
What?
Yep.
Wow, my smartass comment seems a lot less smartass now.
Oi. Just a second, hold on. Wait, go get the food. Hold on 1 second. Sorry.
That's okay.
Just take a break here. So.
Hello? Yes?
Let's see if we can.
Thank you. Yep. Sorry, I got food delivery. I thought I timed it better.
Only a few minutes off. It's okay.
That's all right.